Please be seated. For a long time, I had this idea that prayer had very little to do with faith. I had this picture in my mind that prayer was supposed to look just like this. Eyes closed, hands together. And this is what I did for at least the first, 7 years of my life. There's even this really perfect picture of young Ranie doing this, which was, maybe somewhat of foreshadowing, I'm not sure. And it wasn't until I was about 10 years old that I believed that God could be heard even if our hands weren't in that perfect position. And then around 18, I came around to the idea that prayer could be something like journaling. And I began to make a slight correlation between how I was growing in faith in my prayer life. Finally, by 27, prayer was habitual. It was what continued to root my faith, no matter my changing circumstances. For me, prayer was the moment that I felt I needed to reconnect with who God is and who God was calling me to be. And it is faith that spurs on my desire to be prayerful. And I realized in hindsight that I had so many moments of faith pushing me into this type of habitual, momentary prayer. For example, when all I wanted to do was unleash my mighty wrath on whomever happened to catch me on a bad day, the person who cut me in line at the grocery store, the politician I deemed as irredeemable, it was my faith bringing me back to prayerful thoughts of grace, hope, wonder, curiosity for others. I realized all these moments were just little prayers. Moments when I realized that prayer was just coming out of me. The moment that I was standing there filled so much with joy that nothing but the thought of gratitude was streaming through my consciousness, and I habitually connected all of the joy with the utmost life-giving reality of God. That was prayer. Most recently, one of the most meaningful moments of prayer I realized was the first time that I got a paycheck working here after seminary. And I decided that I was going to send money regularly to the NAACP. And the very first time that I sat down at my computer and entered in my credit card information, I felt this slight unease about gifting any of my hard-earned money, but especially money at all. I felt this unease for the sake of justice. But in the same moment of feeling that unease, that slight discomfort about saying goodbye to that money, I knew that this financial support would help the cause of justice. The cause of justice that God so desperately shared and continues to share with us and asks us to dispense in Christ's name. A justice of mercy for the hurting. That was my most recent powerful prayer moment. I realize also that there are so many ways to pray. Our faith produces so many forms of prayer. As so many forms as there are ways to take in how to discern who God is and who we are, there are ways to pray. So whether you are a closed eyes person, or maybe you're a prayerful walker, maybe you're a journaling person, or maybe even a prayerful artist, and you paint your prayers one brush stroke at a time. no matter how you actually do it, prayer and faith involve action. Which is exactly why Jesus tells the disciples to both pray and to not lose heart at the same time. Because he could have just as easily said, pray, continue to go forth and do works in my name. Or he could have said, pray, continue to love the greedy tax collector and invite him over for supper. Pray, for if you follow me and seek out justice as I have, you must endure. The disciples have faith, and therefore they have these hearts for the works of justice. But they live in a world just like we do, a world that blames the desperate for their desperation and forgets those that are deemed dispensable. And just to be clear, I don't wholeheartedly blame the world, these others that are out there, as the perpetrators of the ones who are doing all this unjust work, okay? No one's got it right. We're all part of it. We're all part of the issue. Let me bring it real close to home. How many times have we forgotten to call the person that we haven't seen in church in a few weeks? And you sit there and you're like, I haven't seen John at church in several weeks. I wonder how he's doing. I should give him a call. And yet, in the chaos of our lives, it just slips out and we forget. Now, I think it's something to take note that we can all be flawlessly put together in one instant, and in the next be completely overwhelmed. And I'm sure you cry out to the Lord in those moments for help, for strength to persevere through the hard moments or the hard seasons. And just like the disciples of that time, Jesus tells us to do not lose heart. Because in our hearts, even if there's just a speck, there lies our faith. And it's prayer that our faith produces deeper roots. It's in prayer that our faith continues to grow and evolve and to deepen. And it's through that we can continue to persevere for our sakes and for the sakes of all God's creation. God, the just judge, hears our cries and answers us. In grief, God sends us all kinds of things, even if it is hard to discern where God is in those moments when we are losing heart. God sends us casseroles, hugs, a listening ear. Sometimes it is someone to bring us endless supplies of tissues. God is there. Not some beaming light from above, not an old man in the sky smiling down on us. God is with us in all the moments. God's justice is grace and mercy. That casserole, I know it might not seem like it, but that casserole is divine justice. That hug is justice. The listening ear, justice. Even tissues, justice. So if we string all of this together, we have prayer and faith, and in growing our faith through prayer, we are pulled further into the relationship with God, and our hearts become that much more ready for God's works of justice, which are heavily marked with mercy. Again, the most simplified we can get it. Prayer and faith produce works of God's justice. And God's justice, as we know through the manifestation of God in Christ, is a particular kind of justice. Not like the ones that we hear about on TV or in the courtroom so often. God's justice is mercy and reconciliation. This text is both an exclamation around God's character and God's call to us as disciples. God is the just God, and God's justice has been revealed through Christ as that which is merciful and reconciling. And this is really good news. It's the kind of good news that has reverberated for thousands of years and continues to reverberate in our souls when we hear it, when we see it, when we see people making leftover meals after a Sunday night supper for those that we know who need food because they are in hard moments of their lives. As Martin Luther King Jr. said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. I think those are hard thoughts to wrap our minds around sometimes, but the arc of the moral universe bends towards God. It bends towards mercy. And it is the prayers and the faith of those that have gone before us that sparked revolution, those that refused segregation, refused the realities of slavery and sexism, and of course prepared meals after the death of a loved one. Like I said, this parable is comforting. God's mercy is alive and well, but it is also a call. At the end of the parable, Jesus leaves the disciples with this really interesting note. If you were paying attention, it was almost like he was talking to the disciples, and while he was telling them this parable, he kind of trails off into his own mind. Have you ever done that, where you're talking and then you have this pivotal awakening and wondering in your own mind, and it just happens to make it into your little spiel? For Jesus, it's this. And yet, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth? I think that's Christ being vulnerable. That's Christ being concerned about humanity, about what he sees, about what he experiences, about what he worries for us. And yet, here we are, after all that has been accomplished. We know the end of the story, and we know that we are called to be that embodiment of Christ's justice. We are called to be the faith-filled people of God, carrying out works of mercy and reconciliation. And I think it's important to note that as we ebb closer and closer to All Saints' Day, we need to think about remembering those who have gone before us, particularly those of impeccable character who toiled for justice, doing works of mercy and reconciliation. And so my prayer for all of us, especially as we make our way towards All Saints, is that we stop a little longer in those prayerful moments, no matter what they look like, so that our faith might be that much more rooted. And in doing so, we flex the arc of mercy a little bit more so, bending it slightly more so, beginning right here in Huntsville.